The concept of state justice in ancient Greece was not merely a collection of arbitrary punishments or ceremonial proclamations. One particularly fascinating example is the decree of Cannonus, an ancient legal instrument that demonstrates the Greeks' early efforts to balance state security with a form of procedural fairness, what we might now call due process, especially when dealing with perceived enemies of the polis. This decree is remarkable not just for its content, but for what it reveals about the social and political anxieties of classical Athens and other city-states during times of internal and external crisis. At its core, the decree of Cannonus addressed individuals or groups accused of threatening the stability of the state. Unlike more informal forms of ostracism or summary exile, Cannonus imposed a structured legal framework for prosecution. The decree stipulated a formal accusation, the right of the accused to present evidence and witnesses, and the obligation of the polis to adjudicate the matter publicly. In essence, it functioned as a proto-due process law. Even enemies of the state could not be condemned without procedural safeguards. This reflects a sophisticated understanding that legal legitimacy depended not merely on the power of the state, but on the perception of fairness and accountability. The historical context of Cannonus helps explain its significance. During the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, Athens and other city-states faced repeated crises, political factionalism, threats from tyrants, and external invasions. In such a volatile environment, the temptation to punish alleged conspirators arbitrarily was high. However, decrees like Cannonus show that Athenian lawmakers recognized the dangers of unchecked authority. By codifying legal procedures, they sought to prevent the abuse of power, ensuring that accusations against political enemies were subject to rigorous scrutiny rather than popular vengeance or the whims of magistrates. Procedurally, the decree of Cannonus contains several key elements that prefigure modern legal concepts. First, it required formal notification of the accused, giving them the opportunity to prepare a defense. This contrasts sharply with earlier practices in which suspects could be summarily arrested or even executed based on rumor or suspicion. Second, the decree emphasized public trial before a council or assembly, reinforcing transparency and communal oversight. Third, it allowed for witness testimony and cross-examination, ensuring that verdicts were based on evidence rather than mere political animosity. Finally, it incorporated penal moderation, distinguishing between different levels of offense and prescribing punishments proportionate to the threat posed. Interestingly, the decree also reveals the Greeks' nuanced conception of enemy. Cannonus was not intended for foreign invaders or casual wrongdoers. It targeted those whose actions threatened the polis from within. In this sense, the decree represents an early effort to balance security and civil liberties. By ensuring that even political enemies received a structured legal hearing, the decree prevented the arbitrary use of state violence, a principle that resonates with contemporary human rights law. From a socio-political perspective, the decree of Cannonus illustrates how law served as a stabilizing force. In democratic Athens, where power was dispersed and the citizen body actively participated in governance, formal procedures were necessary to legitimize state action. By codifying legal protections for the accused, the decree not only restrained magistrates and political factions, but also reinforced the idea that justice was a collective, civic responsibility. This is particularly striking when compared to other ancient legal traditions, where punishment was often immediate, brutal, and personal rather than regulated by law. The legacy of Cannonus extends beyond classical Greece. Scholars of legal history often cite it as a precursor to the broader concept of procedural justice that would later influence Roman law and, eventually, modern legal systems. Its insistence on notification, defense rights, and public trial echoes in the guarantees of due process found in contemporary constitutions worldwide. While the specific penalties and legal language were distinctively Greek, the principles underlying Cannonus, fairness, proportionality, transparency, remain universally relevant. It is worth noting that the decree of Cannonus also demonstrates the tension between law and politics in ancient Greece. While designed to prevent arbitrary persecution, enforcement was not immune to political pressures. Powerful factions could manipulate accusations, and some trials inevitably reflected broader struggles for influence rather than purely legal reasoning. Nevertheless, the decree provided a framework that made such abuses more visible and, crucially, contestable. This interplay between law, politics, and civic oversight offers a compelling example of early legal consciousness and the practical challenges of institutionalizing justice. In conclusion, the decree of Cannonus represents a remarkable achievement in the history of law. It shows that even in the politically charged environment of ancient Greece, lawmakers recognized the need for procedural safeguards, transparency, and proportionality in dealing with state enemies. Far from being a relic of the past, Cannonus embodies principles that continue to underpin modern legal systems: the protection of the accused, the public nature of justice, and the accountability of the state to its citizens. It reminds us that the quest for balanced governance and fair legal processes is not a modern invention but a long-standing human concern.